Please be seated.
There's just a couple of matters I wanted to raise with the four of you before I ask questions of the gentleman at the bar table.
Your voice has dropped again out of it.
Is that better?
Try again.
Can you all hear me? First of all...
Back of the room, can you hear?
You want me to shout? Can I start with you, Bishop Long? I did not, I think, ask you about whether or not you had followed any procedure like Bishop Hurley in relation to reconciliation and whether it was to be in open or otherwise?
I'm certainly open to the concept of a ceremony of lamentation, sorrow and apology, if you like. But I'd like to think that...
I think you're at cross purposes.
Yes, I think that's right too. Bishop Hurley gave evidence that he had provided to all of his parish priests and schools a statement setting out the approach he wished they to take in relation to the sacrament of reconciliation, and that was that it should occur in an open setting in the full view of all participants who are supervised by staff. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
Have you done anything similar?
I haven't written a pastoral letter to that effect. However, the professional standards training sessions that we provide for our clergy and seminarians certainly contain those elements, which, by the way, are stipulated in towards healing document.
Thank you. Bishop Porteous, can I ask you the same question?
Yes, certainly. I haven't done as Bishop Hurley has done, written something specific. In fact, preparing for this commission has highlighted aspects of this question which I'm reflecting on, and it's something which I think would be very valuable to do initially for the priests to talk more specifically about it. In Tasmania generally, the sacrament is celebrated in the open. That's a general practice across the diocese. So I haven't seen a need to say something specific, but I'm certainly taking on board in the light of particularly Bishop Hurley's letter.
Bishop, I've asked the others, but not you, whether you would opt in if there were a Commonwealth redress scheme that invited you to opt in.
For myself?
Yes.
Yes, I would. I'm very much in favour of it. I think it would be a very important step forward, and I would fully support it.
Thank you. Archbishop Prowse, in relation to the sacrament of reconciliation, what's your practice?
At this stage, I haven't felt the need to write a letter because I understand that is the practice already.
Thank you. Perhaps if I can now turn to Bishop Saunders. Perhaps if you could tell the Royal Commission your full name.
I'm Christopher Allen Saunders.
And you're the Bishop of Broome?
Bishop of Broome, West Australia.
And you've held that position since 1996?
That's correct.
Prior to that, what were you in the church?
Prior to that, I was administrator at the cathedral in Broome.
Now, the Diocese of Broome covers a very large area?
It does, 773,000 square kilometres.
How many Catholics do you minister to in that area?
Somewhere in the region of, well, it depends whose figures you believe, but somewhere in the region of 10,000.
And you have a dozen or so Catholic schools?
That's correct, yes, 13.
Now, in terms of your engagement in the Diocese of Broome with children, you clearly are involved with children at the school?
Yes.
Do you have a welfare arm, if I can put it that way, a Catholic care or something similar?
Yes, we have Centre Care, which has been operating for some years, and it operates as something that originates from the diocese.
And in addition to those two areas?
No, not really. Just the parishes, and the schools, yes, but no other agencies as such.
In terms of the parishes, are there organised activities in relation to children?
Well, because of the distances involved, there isn't a lot of that sort of thing that happens. If it does, it's usually school-based, in which case it comes under the auspices of Catholic education, although the priest may well be involved. But while we have only 10 parishes, we have numerous remote communities that we service, and the priests spend a large amount of their time, unless they're in Broome, apart from Broome, they spend a large amount of their time travelling. So they organised youth groups tend to be school-based rather than parish-based.
Thank you. Now, you, in the Diocese of Broome, apply the policies and procedures that have been established nationally towards healing, integrity and ministry and the like.
Yes, we have.
You haven't created or adapted any policy for specific use in your diocese?
No, basically because we haven't had cause to use even those as yet.
There haven't been any complaints?
There has been a complaint, but it was looked into by the by the police, and wasn't taken any further as the person involved is accused is out of the country.
What did you do in relation to that complaint?
Well, I was out of the country myself when it became public, so I asked the local priest to contact the police. This had already happened because it was in fact something that was revealed within the school bounds. So then we sort of stepped back from it.
What did you do in respect of the priest? I understand you said he was overseas, but did you take any action in relation to the priest's faculties or?
Yes, I rang his superior to tell him that when he returned from vacation that he would be stood down while there was a police investigation took place. His superior didn't know that he was in the country and didn't know where he was at that stage. And so that's all that we did.
Did the priest come back?
He did not.
He didn't come back?
He did not. Despite the fact that I had urged his superior to send him back.
What order was it?
It was the Herald of the Good News.
Thank you. Is it a mail order?
Heralds, plural, of the Good News. It's a mail order of priests based in the subcontinent.
Thank you. In your statement at paragraph 8, you say that your observations of the working of this Royal Commission and the encouragement of the Bishops' Conference has led you to be more vigilant with regard to clergy and religious. That's right?
That's correct.
How has that vigilance played out?
Well, in two ways. We're very, very strict on any priest coming into the diocese. We have a lot of people on holidays. It's the only significant industry that is at work in Broome is the tourist industry. And we have a lot of clergy and religious who would come up on holidays. So we're very strict about them having professional standards and clearances before they are able to celebrate Mass or to be part and parcel of any life in the parish. And the other thing that we have decided to do is that at the next meeting of the priests and pastoral associates and principals, that we'll be having in-servicing from Professional Standard Office of West Australia.
You said in relation to the clergy that come on holidays and the like, that they need to have professional standards clearance. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, they have to have a letter from their bishop saying they're in good standing.
So a certificate, as it were, of good standing.
That's correct.
Anything else?
Well, this national system that's being rolled out will eventually take care of that.
By which you mean the register?
That's correct.
You've heard the discussion this morning, Bishop, about why the clergy and religious have been engaged in child sexual abuse to the extent that has been revealed.
Yes.
Do you have any comments you want to make on why you think that the abuse has occurred, and secondly, the response to it has been as it is?
Well, I would agree that there's been a massive failure on behalf of the Church to respond appropriately to the issues and the matters and the allegations of sexual abuse throughout Australia. I would go so far as to say that while these are individual failings, there may well be some part of the system that's at fault. With regard to clergy, I would think we need a closer examination of the three main areas that have been raised already, which is recruitment, and what happens at recruitment. And I mean, myself, I was in my third year of the seminary before we did any psychological testing, which in those days was in its infancy. But I believe that that's now common practice. And I believe that should be applied again later during formation, and I understand in some places at least that it is. So recruitment and formation. The matter of that you refer to quite often, which is clericalism, I think is a very significant problem. I'm not sure that I agree with all the definitions of clericalism, but there's one definition I agree with, and that is that it's the abuse of power and authority. And it stems from, I think, an immature understanding of church. And by that, I mean perhaps even a redundant understanding of church. We know that in pre-Vatican times, that the church, the theological underpinning with regard to the church was that the church was a perfect society. We know also that in the teachings of Vatican II, that there was an enormous shift pushing the church from that into the church as communio, as a communion of service together. Now, that shift has not yet taken place. It is not yet complete. That is to say, that the theological underpinning is not yet entirely understood in its new format. And I think that's what the Holy Father is trying to do. As he speaks against clericalism, he's talking about against privilege. He's speaking in favour of service. Now, the social critics tell us that it takes something like about 75 years for an ecumenical council to make itself fully effective. And we're about 50 years down the track. I think the Holy Father is really trying to change the church enormously along the lines as church, as communio and as service, and moving us away from that privileged position or description that might have once defined us, and still does, I'm afraid.
What can you do in your area, as in the Diocese of Broome, to make that happen?
Well, I'm in the fortunate position I only have 13 clergy altogether. and we know each other very well. We work very closely together. We're also very busy people, but we are involved closely with the workings of the communities in which we are immersed, and we work closely together. There wouldn't be a day go past that I don't ring one of the priests and talk to them. There wouldn't be a week gone past when I haven't spoken to most of the, if not all of the pastoral associates that are also at work there. So it's one of the advantages of being small is, and as a diocese and as a small diocese, we can do things in a way that other places can't. I know argument by analogy is very weak, but if some of the other dioceses by size are Coles and Woolworths, and we're the corner store, and that's how we operate. And very much so do we know each other and know our strengths and our weaknesses. So to answer your question, we bring to the attention of the clergy in the times that we meet and the conversations we have, not only our aspirations, but also our worries and our concerns. And one of those concerns would be that the priest would exist, in his own mind at least, or in the image of others as somebody who is in a privileged position. I'd like to think that they're at the coalface alongside their brothers and sisters.
Unlike Coles and Woolworths, you're not in competition with your other diocesan bishops, are you?
I'm not.
And there are various forums available to you with your fellow bishops to discuss matters of common interest to the Church.
Yes.
At any of those gatherings or forums, has this issue been raised?
Which particular issue?
The one you've just spoken about in terms of
Clericalism. I've certainly have been part of conversations on several occasions with individual bishops or with a group of bishops. I don't know that I stand to be corrected here, I don't know that we've spoken about it in plenary as a subject, but certainly with groups of bishops and individually with bishops.
In those discussions, have you found that your view is generally held or you're an outlier?
Well, nobody's expressed a view to the contrary. I mean, in the conversations of which I've been party, there is a great concern that our clergy are seen to be, by all of the bishops, as serving their people and serving them in equality. We know that doesn't exist, but it's also difficult in some circumstances to change things overnight, to change the scene as we would want it. Certainly, one of the things that's come up in conversation is that this matter of clericalism, and indeed many of the things that have been raised, the matters that have been raised by the Royal Commission, should become a subject of discussion at our synod, the Australian Synod, which is planned in 2020. I would think that it has been fertile ground here today and in the other days to have listened to the proceedings of the Royal Commission, and I imagine that the findings of the Royal Commission will be not only fertile ground but will be subject matter for that synod.
You refer to things not changing overnight, but of course it's been 20 years since the Church set up its first formal structure being towards healing. So there has been a deal of time that's passed.
Yes, there has.
And have there been changes in that time?
Oh, well, I've seen lots of changes, but I mean, one of the bishops, I think, said that sometimes parish priests are in a position where they're unassailable. Perhaps that's my word, not his. But that being the case, it's sometimes difficult, very difficult, to implement the sort of change that you want to implement. Because really it means changing people's attitudes. And if you're going to change people's attitudes, that means well-founded and strategies and good formation, ongoing formation for clergy with these issues in mind.
When you say good strategy, do you mean strategy in addition to formation, or that is part of the strategy? I
mean winning over the minds of clergy and those that are working with you. in such a way that they'll want to not only cooperate but be part and parcel of a new way of being church.
I take it from what you've said that there are priests whose minds have yet to be won over.
I would imagine that I haven't won over.
No, that haven't been won over.
Yes.
That's right.
I would
Your
imagine so.
understanding. What does one need to do to win them over?
Well, I don't know that I can answer that. I think
Church
that's.
has to be able to answer it, doesn't it?
I think that every church in itself needs to answer that. The Church of the Kimberley, where I come from, we're doing what we can because we know the people and we know the situation. The Church of wherever we want to talk about knows its own people and needs to apply itself to its own people. It's not, a national approach is only as good as it is only good if it's implemented locally. To have standards at a national standard is a wonderful thing, but it has to be accepted and then applied locally, and that's what takes time.
And you believe you've applied it locally in your area?
Well, I think we have. I think we have a sense of mission that we share. Part of that, I have to say, is because of the geographical location of where we are and how we operate and the small numbers that are involved. We're able to discuss these issues in mature matters, in a mature way, and apply strategies where necessary.
So the effect of what you're saying is that it depends upon individual bishops to effect the change you've described.
The way the Catholic Church is, yes, it depends largely on the bishop, not entirely, but largely on the bishop and the leadership that the bishop affords his diocese. Of course, he has to have the cooperation of others too.
Others being outside his diocese?
Others being the priests that he's working with within his own diocese.
So you're suggesting that change will only happen if it happens locally and if the bishop wants there to be change and the priests agree that there'll be change?
I think we can paint a national picture of an ideal circumstance, but it has to be applied locally. And the only way that you can apply it effectively is if you know your people and if you know your people and you know how to apply it effectively. I mean, I think that I'm a reasonable bishop of the Kimberley. I don't know how I'd go somewhere else. And I think that bishops who are in their own locations ought to, if they don't already, ought to know their people and their circumstances. And largely, I believe this is the case.
How can those bishops who have not done what you've done be influenced to take that step?
Well, I think the workings of this Royal Commission, but also the discussions we've had as church. I've been a bishop since 1996, and it was then, as you quite rightly point out, some 20 years ago, that these terrible things came to light, and we've been trying to grapple with them. There has been a generational change in the construct of the Bishops' Conference, for instance. You know, I mean, I came in as a junior bishop in 1996, and by ordination, I think I'm now about number 4. That carries no particular weight with it, but it just does show what the generational change has happened in those 20 years. And along with those generational changes is I think, an openness to a new vision of church. It is something developing, and it is something that hasn't developed fast enough. And I do believe that moments like this will be a great source of energy for us to apply ourselves.
This moment has been going on for 4 years now, in the sense of the Royal Commission. if it were to be the motivating force that you describe, would it not be expected that in the last few years there was significant rather than incremental change?
Well, I think that the changes that have happened, as I observe them in other churches in Australia, have been significant. I mean, there have been significant moments. I've just listened to some this morning, and some of those have been a result of the Royal Commission, and some of those have been a result of the bishops applying themselves to what is an urgent matter in their own diocese. Notwithstanding, I admit that the change is not at the pace that it ought to be, and not at the intensity it ought to be. And I think we've got somewhere yet to go. But I have seen not just incremental change, but significant change, and change in attitude.
What is the impetus you believe is necessary for it to change at a greater pace?
Well, I think that we need to share as a church the wrongdoing that has happened, the sufferings that are apparent amongst those who are survivors or victims, or whatever word you wish to use, to recognise that as a group, as an entire national church, just how awful and how dreadful this has been. But to move on from that and to do whatever is necessary to make sure that it never happens again. I believe that the synod that's coming up, whereas a synod is a magnificent opportunity, not just for bishops to talk or priests, but also for lay people to be involved, and from the grassroots up. And I think our people are going to tell us that they want better leadership than they're getting. And I hope that together we can build that leadership.
When you say we need to share as a church the wrongdoing that has happened, you haven't done that yet?
Well, we have done it, but I mean, I think to do it nationally with a strategy attached to it. I mean, we have done on several occasions. There are numerous bishops individually, and the Australian Catholic bishops themselves who have made the plenary that has made statements apologising. But I think we're in a state of shock in a sense, you know? And there have been numerous tremors that have started, as you say, 4 years ago, and I was here on the first day of the latest sessions, and I've heard those figures. And like every other bishop, it was another tremor to see a complete picture nationally. We may know what's going on in our own church, or maybe even to the church next door. But to see it nationally and to see the picture as clearly painted as it is has been a tremor and a shock for all of us. And I think a great awakening.
Well, there may be those in the community, Bishop, who are surprised to hear you say that the shock is a recent one in relation to those figures when there have been claims coming in for 30 years now.
There's a difference between hearing piecemeal figures from this place or from that place or from there, and then on the other hand, to see it all collated together. And that's simply what I mean.
You mean the sheer numbers as indicated in the claims data which was produced?
That's correct.
And that's what's shocking?
Well, no, as I've said before, there's much more hurt in the community that we have recognised, but the extent of it is something that the extent of it is, for the first time I see it now, in the numbers that were printed the other day. We've always understood that there has been a terrible happening in the church in Australia, and that people have been grievously hurt. Injustices have been done. We have, all of us, I think, certainly myself anyway, have sat with victims of of child abuse, and that strikes deeply into your heart to listen to the story of a person, of somebody that you know, even of somebody that you've just met. There's a difference between that and looking at a collation of figures. That's all I was trying to say.
By a collation of figures, you mean the number of claims that alleged priests or clergy had sexually abused one or more child?
Yes, that's what I mean.
Now, you heard Bishop Hurley's evidence in relation to the Sacrament of Reconciliation and what he has done. Have you done anything similar in your diocese?
Well, no, I haven't. The general practice for reconciliation in our diocese is to use the second rite, which is, as he described, I think. Actually, the second rite goes a bit further. There's a public examination of conscience, scripture readings, so it's a liturgical moment, and then the individual confessions take place in the open, but obviously people distanced from each other.
So in full sight with supervision in relation to children?
Yes, and adults, yes.
Thank you. Now, just turning to the redress scheme, which the Commonwealth has indicated it will introduce, have you formed a view as to whether your diocese should be part of that scheme?
I think it's absolutely essential.
Thank you. Perhaps if I can now turn to you, Bishop, would you tell the Royal Commission your full name?
Antoine Cherville-Taravay.
And your position?
Maronite Bishop of Australia.
Perhaps you could say that again somewhat slower.
Maronite Bishop of Australia.
Thank you. And the Maronite is an Eastern Rite eparchy?
Yes.
Perhaps you could explain to us what that means.
In the Church, the Catholic Church, we have Eastern churches and the Roman Catholic Church. And some of the Eastern churches, they are sui juris, which means they have their autonomy. And we have the Code of Canon Law, the Eastern Code of Canon Law. And to give it like much more better and easier picture to understand, that the church is like a tree. We have a branch, substantial big branch, which is Roman Catholic Church, and we have 23 small churches, they are the Eastern churches.
What is different about the way the Eastern churches practice?
When it comes to the Eastern churches, and I can talk for the Maronite Church, we have 4, I would say, significant differences. Firstly, the way that we worship our liturgy is different from the Roman Catholic Church. And in the liturgy, we still use the Aramaic, the Syriac, which is the ancient language. The second difference is the history, because for the Maronite Church, we have our own history, starting in the end of the 4th century, beginning of the 5th century, with a patron saint, the father of the Maronite Church, Saint Maroon. And this is something that we have different to the other churches. However, when it comes to the history of the church, the whole church is aware of the existence of the Eastern churches. And the last one, when it comes to the Code of Canon Law, we have the Western Code of Canon Law and we have the Eastern Code of Canon Law. Especially in the Eastern Code of Canon Law, there we have the particular law for the Maronite Church, in which it's clear that the head of the church is a patriarch, and also we have in our church the regulation and the Code of Canon Law for married priests.
So priests can be married within the Maronites?
Since the beginning of the Maronite Church, we have had the tradition of married men, or to the married man to become priest and to serve parishes. And this concept continue all throughout the history of the Maronite Church. And up to the beginning of the 20th century, almost 90% of the clergy serving in parishes were married men. And after that, we start to have some candidates to the priesthood to opt for celibate life, to become priest as diocesan priest and to serve in the parishes.
Do you have any understanding as to why those candidates were taking a different view?
Firstly, I will say in the Maronite Church we have also the monastic tradition, which is anyone would like to opt for celibate life, he will go to the monastery and will live in the monastery with community of monks. And those who would like to serve in the parishes, most likely the tradition will encourage them to be married priest, to be married men and to prepare themselves to become priest. So the idea of having celibate priest, it is there. However, I believe it was influenced by the practice in the Roman Catholic Church that we start having diocesan celibate priests in our churches.
You say that the tradition will encourage them to be married priests. Why is it considered that it's preferable for them to be married priests, those people serving in the parishes?
Since the beginning of the church, if we go back to the tradition of St. Peter, he was a married man. And following that tradition of St. Peter, in the Eastern churches, it was developed to have this tradition of married priest to serve in the parishes.
I think you've said that you don't have any schools that operate within the Maronites, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you have anything similar to Catholic Care or an arm of the church that carries out social services?
Yes, we are developing an agency called Maronite Care for that purpose.
Do you also have parish-based activities that involve children?
Sorry, I couldn't.
Parish-based activities that involve children?
Yes, in our parishes we have activities for children, especially during Saturday and Sunday, and we have different groups of children coming to the parishes for that reason.
Now, I think you follow towards healing.
Yes, we do.
Have you had many complaints in relation to allegations against Maronites?
Only one complaint that after I became bishop in 2013, a few months later we received one complaint in October 2013.
What happened with that complaint?
Firstly, there is, because after the verdict, there is no publication order. So I might ask you to guide me in answering this question.
Certainly.
Yeah.
By verdict, do you mean in a criminal court?
Yeah.
So a person was convicted?
Yes, the person was convicted.
I see.
However, there is no publication order, so if you can help me in answering this question, please.
In respect of his name, is that how you understand it?
I'm trying to ask you to guide me how to understand the non-publication order.
The complainant as well as the...
So I'm trying to understand whether it's an order...
wrongdoer, and that would be to protect the name of the complainant. So no names and no locations either.
What happened to that priest? He was a priest, was he?
Yes.
What happened to that priest after the court verdict?
He's serving his sentence in jail.
And have you taken any action against him?
When we received the complaint, immediately we put him on leave, and we informed we were in touch with the Office of the Professional Standard of the Catholic Church, and we were guided by them. We informed the police, and the procedure started. So he was on leave. He has no right to practice any ministry during that time, during the investigation.
Thank you. Now, you say in your statement, do you have a copy of that with you?
Yes.
Now, I think that's dated the 4th of November 2016.
Correct.
And the contents of that are true and correct, Bishop?
Yes, it is correct.
In paragraph 50, towards the end of your statement, you describe that most of your clergy live in a presbytery with other priests or priests, and you say that they're supervised in that they live in company with one another. Now, is it the case that they are aware by you that by living together they have some supervisory role over each other?
Yeah. Let me first explain, Mr. Ernest, that for the clergy in the diocese at the moment, I have 54. 21 of them are married, so they live with their families at home. And we adopt the policy in the diocese to try not to have a priest living alone, to have all the time 2 priests, 3 priests. In some parishes we have 6 or 7 priests living together. So the idea for that, it's not only for supervision. The idea for that is they will support each other in their ministry, and they will help each other, and they have some kind of community life, it is good for the pastoral work that they are delivering in the parishes. Of course, in every parish there is a parish priest, someone in charge, and it is common practice that the priest in charge will report back to me about how it is going with the priest and how the life is going in the parish.
Thank you. Now, do you in the Maronites celebrate the sacrament of reconciliation in a similar way to the other panel members?
Yes, we do.
Do you have any requirement that there be those processes taking place in public and under supervision when it comes to children?
What kind of processes you're talking about?
Well, perhaps if I can show you, if we have another copy of the Sacrament of Reconciliation by Bishop Hurley. No, we don't have a copy. Perhaps I can read it to you. He, in his letter to the principals and parish priests, he said that he's asking them to ensure that the Sacrament of Reconciliation in schools is celebrated in a church in an open setting in full view of all participants who are supervised by staff. Is that a practice of the Maronites?
Same in the parish, because we don't have school, as you previously mentioned. And when it comes to the parish and the children coming to the parish for reconciliation, it's the same procedure, yes.
Now, have you also given consideration to the scheme proposed by the Commonwealth in relation to redress?
At the moment, we don't have any claim for redress, but we are absolutely happy to adopt this scheme.
Thank you. Now, I think I omitted to ask you, Archbishop Porteous, in relation to the redress scheme. Do you have a position in relation to whether you would wish to participate?
Yes, you did actually ask me that before, but I'm happy to repeat that I'd be fully supportive of a redress scheme.
Thank you. And Bishop Long?
Yes, indeed. Currently, we don't have a cap on the financial payment to victims who come to our Office of Safeguarding and Professional Standards. So I think our system works quite well in respect of justice and fairness to victims. But certainly I would fully support the national redress scheme.
Thank you, Bishop. I have nothing further on.
Mr. Atkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honour. Archbishop Prowse, I just wanted to ask you about two aspects of the Institute for Professional Standards and Safeguarding. In your statement at paragraph 8 or point 8, you referred to its establishment in September 2015, and then on the 9th of March 2016, your media release. And at point 19 in your statement, you say that the establishment of the IPSS has been strongly supported by the clergy, the various agencies and the people of the Archdiocese. And I just wanted to preface the first aspect by asking, would you agree that if there is to be national leadership within the Church, that will start at the top? At the top in Australia? If there is to be national leadership of any change within the Catholic Church, yes, that will start at the top?
Sometimes it starts at the top and moves down. Sometimes it starts locally and moves nationally. Okay. I'm thinking particularly of the formation of the Catholic Professional Standards Limited, which in a sense has come after somewhat of the experiences in local dioceses and also the experience of this Royal Commission. So I think it's both of us, both the local and the national, learning from each other, but delighted that the national structure is starting to take form, because what has been needed, Commissioner, I think, is a consistency across the whole of Australia, and at the moment I'm not sure if that consistency is there in regard to standards and expectations, training and protocols. Some dioceses seem to be ahead of others for all sorts of reasons, and I think this will help with an audit of that to ensure that there is a standardisation of high quality across Catholic Australia.
Could I ask, quite sincerely, then what role do you see for all of the archbishops in Australia in terms of leadership?
I think we all must sign up to it. We have all signed up to it. We must speak with one voice on the national proposal here, the new company coming together. We must back it with finance. We must ensure that we give way to its recommendations so that when they come into a particular diocese to audit us and perhaps find deficiencies or whatever, that there's a docility in all the dioceses to be able to respond nationally. I think there's a common mind and common heart, and I believe that's already there amongst the bishops.
Okay. When you say you think there is, have you discussed it?
We have discussed it at length at the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference, but of course it's only more recent times, Commissioner, that a particular proposal and a constitution has been put forward, yes.
Okay, and in terms of issues such as the establishment of the Institute, do you share what you've done in that regard with the other archbishops?
Yes, well, the dioceses are all in linked with each other because of the new structures that we have. Our professional standards people speak to each other. I know some perhaps speak more closely with others on developing particular protocols together, learning from each other. Again, I think it's rather piecemeal, and I would hope that in the times ahead that we can finesse this national discussion so that it becomes not occasional or in that area, not that area, but that consistency across the board on these important matters.
Did any of the other archbishops get back to you and say that the IPSS is a wonderful idea and they're going to implement it in their archdiocese?
No, not directly, no. I wouldn't say that, no. But I know that some of the dioceses are taking some leadership from that. We've learnt a lot from other dioceses. I think of Maitland Newcastle, and their protocols there have been very, very helpful for us. So the gatherings of people and the committees, I think it is happening, but as I say, perhaps rather piecemeal.
The second aspect, Archbishop, was that at point 14 of your statement you talked about the importance of addressing the effects of harm and the impact on survivors. And I just wanted to ask you as well, in point 17 and at point 19, I'll just read part of point 17. IPSS is a central point of contact with various other church and civil authorities and agencies.
Yes.
And in terms of that scope of and agencies, does that include those organisations that support victims? There's quite a number of them throughout Australia.
I think we need to improve more on that. But yes, there are some victims groups and victims themselves that we have deferred to. In fact, I could think of one prominent victim who was, in fact, on one of our advisory committees on the IPSS.
Yes, I think you mentioned him in your statement.
I did.
But apart from individuals, what victim support groups are in contact with IPSS?
It's piecemeal, and it's not organised. I think that's an area. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's an area that we could do a lot more in.
Well, thank you. And could I just ask you, Archbishop Porteous, were you aware of this entity that was set up, the Institute for Professional Standards and Safeguarding?
I wasn't specifically. I'm aware that all dioceses have been working to set up agencies. In Tasmania, we're in the process of finalising our own called Safe Communities, and part of the process there was to look to what other dioceses were doing. So it may well have been that those who were doing the research did look at it, but I haven't been personally involved in it.
You do mention that project in your statement. Within Tasmania, then, under your stewardship, do any of the programs you have engage with organisations that work as victim support agencies?
No, we haven't.
No. All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Archbishop Prowse, your evidence to us was that you have 56 schools in your parish.
Correct.
And if I've understood what you have provided to us in your statement, you're effectively the structural head of the Catholic Education Office.
Correct.
In that, in the arrangement as between the office and yourself. You, I'm sure, have been following in general terms the themes that have emerged from some of the work of the Commission to date, in particular the evidence of victims and survivors who've spoken to us about cultures inside the institutions that formed barriers to those children and young people being able to report, which included a culture of not having any open discussion about any matters relating to sex, that we've been told that victims didn't have a language often to report, that they were filled with guilt and shame and fear of the authority of the individual cleric or representative of the church. So what my question is to you, based on that, is what in your schools, what programs are now either under development or being delivered to address those issues that are now very firmly on the table?
Yes, Your Honour. First of all, there's been a sea change, I suppose, in the fact that priests and religious, like religious sisters and brothers, are very, very few and far between in the school classroom itself. Yes. So that issue is not there. We are now talking about largely lay people and married couples and married people, and the idea there too, of course, the ongoing professional formation of teachers on sexuality and human growth and maturity, also involving the young people themselves, particularly to identify, as it were, suspicious behaviour of adults. There's new programs up now that are in our schools to help in an appropriate manner for children to be able to read signs of adults acting in a way that creates angst in a young person. And this can also be done in the internet sort of programs as well. I think one of our strengths really is that, and changes too, that as it were a culture of fear and sort of sex is only to be spoken in a particular manner, and in any other way it's spoken of it's dirty, or I would hope that those days have gone, and that human sexuality is presented as a great gift, a very positive gift from God, and a gradual unfolding of the appropriate expression of that. So I do feel over the, say, for instance, since 1950, and certainly during Vatican II Council and since, that there has been an enormous change in this for the positive.
So are you confident that those sorts of programs addressed in particular to the barriers that have been well and truly identified throughout the research, are you confident that those programs are being delivered in each of the 56 schools in your parish?
Yeah, in the diocese, yes, I am, Your Honour. I'm quite confident about that, and delight with the great competence of the Education Office to supervise and audit that, and to give proper training to the teachers providing this service.
Are they programs that are being delivered by the teachers with particular training?
Well, looking at it panoramically, it's by the teachers, but in many cases with their parents, with the parents of the children, and also some of our lay leaders that are employed directly by the Archdiocese, going around as resource people into the schools on human life and sexuality, and not only upgrading the teachers, but also providing resources and assistance to school communities to be able to respond adequately to this important area.
Bishop Long, you represent one of the fastest growing areas of Sydney, in fact of Australia, in terms of the church and young people in the Parramatta Diocese. You'd be aware that the Vatican has signed up to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which says that the best interests of the child must be paramount in organisations that have signed. And it is consistent with much of the statements by the Pope Francis. Yet it's not a language that we've heard in many of the panels, or even this panel at all. And much of the discussion's been about the priests and their slow acceptance of these matters, but in a way that I understand. And we've talked about the Church's response. Do you have any thoughts about how the Church will actually frame itself as a church that puts the interests of children genuinely ahead of other competing interests within the Church?
And yes, I think, Commissioner, if the Church is a good global citizen, then it has to show that the safety and protection of the innocent children must be of paramount interest, of absolute priority. And in order to make it happen, I do believe that there needs to be a holistic, comprehensive approach. In other words, it has to be at all levels of the governance structure of the Church, be it local, diocesan, or universal. So, for instance, as I alluded to before, the problem of clericalism can't just be addressed at a diocesan level. It has to be addressed as a whole church, because the whole church is embroiled in a certain model of being church, whether church as a communal, which Vatican II enunciated and pointed to, or the church as a perfect society, which is not just no longer relevant, but can contribute to the abetting of the sexual abuse, precisely because of the attendant issue of clericalism, which is integral to that model of church. We need to have a holistic and comprehensive approach in order to move forward. My hope is that we would come to the model of church that is not only relevant for today's society, but also life-giving and above all consistent with the message of the gospel.
And Bishop Saunders, just related to that, you indicated that one has to understand the people that you are in your church, the priests and that, and one appreciates the slowness to change. But do you think that, given that the church has made a commitment to the protection of children and the importance of children more generally, that reluctant priests generally around Australia will in fact remove or release some of that reluctance or resistance in favour of protecting and advancing the interests of children? Or is that a concept that may not resonate with many of the priests in your own diocese and generally?
Well, speaking from a point of view of the Kimberley, where I come from, I would have no lack of cooperation from clergy at all. In terms of the church elsewhere, I don't detect privately or from any other sources clergy saying that they're not interested in protecting the rights of children, or they're not going to join any program that doesn't. I was referring more to the matter of the abuse of authority in clericalism and the stamp of authority upon a community which isn't necessarily healthy, whereby a person who may be a parish priest could take it upon themselves to be the final court of disputed returns, and not only that, but the one who runs everything. And that's not the sort of church that we're trying to build. The matter of child protection, I don't know of any parish priest to say they're not interested in that.
But just if I just push that one a little bit further, if I can, Bishop, there is a connectedness between the two. And so the safeguardings in relation to children, does it not depend on a reflection of and change in practice in relation to the issues like clericalism that we've talked about, the way in which priests exercise authority? They're not unrelated to the protection and advancement of children's rights and well-being.
Well, the degree to which they are, I think, would be a matter of some conjecture and debate. At the very least, I think that the matter of clericalism in our ranks needs to be carefully investigated. Often, what I have seen as clericalism is priests who simply do not want to share authority as such, and who run their parishes as a totalitarian regime. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not interested in the welfare of children. Now, the connectedness between a martinet or a person who runs a totalitarian regime and the abuse of children, certainly we would think that has happened. But there are the other point is that today there are so many protocols in place that, please God, that would make that very difficult. Notwithstanding the fact, but the necessity to change the model of church that we have in order to be a healthy church and healthier church. I don't know if I'm making my point.
Yep.
Ms. Needham?
Yes, would Your Honour mind if I spoke from there so I could see all the bishops?
No, that's fine.
Ms. Furness doesn't mind. I have some questions for Archbishop Prowse. Archbishop, you were asked some questions about the clerical influence in seminaries. Now, I think you're on the council advising the Archbishop of Sydney in relation to the Sydney Seminary, is that correct?
Correct, for the last year.
And do your seminarians attend that seminary?
They do.
And what is your role in relation to advising the Archbishop there in relation to those kind of cultural issues?
The Archbishop's mandate to the committee we now have is to review what's happening in general across the board of the seminary and to advise him on areas that seem to be going well, areas that could be improved upon.
And in your view, are there any areas that could be improved upon in the Sydney Seminary?
Yes, an area came up in regard to the study program and being at different venues, which was causing practical problems for the seminarians to gather together more frequently in the one place at the seminary. That was a major concern, which we're still looking at, and we're about to produce a report to the Archbishop. On other areas, we asked the different, the rector of the seminary is always present, but to review with us what's happening. And in general, I think the group of people there, which some are clerics, but some lay women there that are quite expert in certain areas. Generally, we are finding that the seminary there is in a very healthy state.
And do you attend the seminary to carry out your functions?
The meetings are held at the seminary, and wherever I can, I try to get there the night before. I would like to visit my own seminarians, and then I might be celebrating the Mass and then mixing with the seminarians over the meal table. Last year, for instance, also they asked me to lead a small retreat, and there was some good interaction there. It's a very international seminary by way of origins, national origins, and I felt that it was reflecting the multicultural nature of Australia.
And have you observed any signs of what I could term creeping clericalism at that particular seminary?
Well, I probably haven't been there long enough to be able to discuss that, to be able to observe that. But I mean, no, I must say that I didn't, and if I did find it, it would probably be somebody who was sort of strutting about, sort of feeling that because they happen to be wearing something that they're more important than others, and those subtle signs of abuse of power. I didn't notice that, but I haven't been there long enough to be able to detect that.
Archbishop, do you think it would only just turn up in, as you say, someone strutting around, or you need rather to think about the whole of the culture in which they're operating?
Yes, and the culture is very interactive with the home diocese, Your Honour. There's with the pastoral years and what have you. I think.
But forgive me, that's not really the issue. It's the way they'll ultimately interact with lay people.
Yes, yes.
That's what matters.
Yes.
So what matters is the culture that's being developed in the institution in relation to the way they are perceived when they go into parish life.
Yes.
address that issue?
Not yet, but I'd like, given the insights of the Royal Commission, I'd like to look into that more fully. Thank you.
And you're also currently the administrator of the Diocese of Wagga.
Yes, just over the last few months I have been.
And that's a temporary appointment until a bishop is appointed.
Yes, the former bishop has resigned due to ill health, and we now wait for the Pope to appoint a new bishop. And in the interregnum, I've been asked to be the apostolic administrator.
And has that been for the last 4 months?
Yes, it has.
And have you in that time visited the Wagga Seminary?
I have once for an extended afternoon and evening, only once though.
And are you in a position to make or recommend changes, if necessary, to the Wagga Seminary?
No, I wouldn't think I would have the authority to do that just at the moment, but I would like to in the times ahead to be able to visit there a bit more often. I have been in touch with the rector there through correspondence and what have you.
Thank you. Now, you also asked some questions about your non-attendance at the Marist College Liturgy of Lament.
Yes.
Is it the case that you refused to go to that?
No, I didn't refuse to go to it. Some of my senior priests went to it. I was very keen to engage the whole diocese on this important area, and in hindsight, though, I think I did make a mistake. I should have been there, and I publicly apologised and asked forgiveness for it.
And was that the media release dated the 11th of November, which you published?
Correct.
Thank you. Now, Archbishop Porteous, you gave evidence that your seminarians attended this Corpus Christi Seminary in Melbourne, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And you gave some evidence about a psychologist being in-house. Are you aware of any other screening process that goes on in that seminary?
Yes, my reference to the psychologist before was in relation to Sydney. So with regard to Melbourne, I've actually for a long time I've had a great confidence in the processes that are in place in Melbourne, and they have some very thoroughgoing sessions to deal with growth in sexual maturity and so on. The processes in the seminary itself, I think there's very high quality of pastoral oversight from the formation staff. So all my experience with Melbourne has been very, very positive and gives me a great deal of confidence in the programs that are in place in that seminary.
And are you aware of the vitality service provided by Dr. Robinson, who gave evidence earlier in these proceedings?
I've been aware of it because that was in Sydney, yes.
Yes,
and
are you aware?
When I was in Sydney.
I'm sorry.
Yep. When I was in Sydney, I was conscious of its presence.
And are you aware of her service having any role in the Melbourne Seminary?
No, I would not be familiar with that.
Okay. Now, you asked some questions about the Safe Communities program, or I think you mentioned that in an answer. Would you be able to tell the Commissioners a little more about that program, which I think is yet to be launched?
That's correct. In the process, particularly the last 4 years, and I've only been in the position of Archbishop for 3 years. So the last 3 years, with the Royal Commission occurring, it has again, I've been watching and observing, listening, and that has been a process that has encouraged me to look at our own processes. We've done a number of things in the Archdiocese. We've introduced, for example, an online management tool. We currently have 707 people, I think, doing that, and part of that includes issues around sexuality and sexual abuse and so on, and harassment, and it's broader than just sexual abuse. So we've introduced that. That's been running now for, I think, well over a year. We've looked at the question of receiving priests from overseas, and conscious that priests can come from very different cultural backgrounds, and I'm very aware that their images of priesthood can be quite different because of their cultural background. So certainly when I've been speaking to them individually, I've been emphasising the nature of priestly ministry. I've been talking to them specifically about the spirit of service, and as well as that, we've been developing an enculturation program in the diocese, and part of that has been sessions with our professional standards officer, which they're taken through in some detail, taken through both professional standards, integrity of ministry, and towards healing. So they're fully familiar with those programs. I've also sent priests over to Melbourne. Melbourne also run a program for new overseas priests. So I've sent priests over to do that 1 week program as well. So I've been trying to be fairly active in ensuring the priests who come from overseas are well prepared or have an understanding of the cultural differences in Australia and the expectations of them in various areas. And then one of the major works, though, has been working towards the establishment of a program across the whole of the Archdiocese of Hobart. A couple of things I was very keen to do was, firstly, to not only have our official agencies, but every agency that's related to the Catholic Church. So we have L'Arche, for instance, the L'Arche community. So every community, now we've been involved in discussions with them to consult with them about what programs they have in place, and gradually we're putting together a comprehensive program where we've consulted every agency in the diocese. So we have an umbrella, and that establishes principles across the diocese, and then every organisation within the diocese can test their own individual protocols against this program. We're using the material that came forth last year from the Royal Commission, the 10 points. We've used that as our template for the actual document. We're close to getting it finished. It's just with all the consultation and obviously linking in with all the various legal requirements in Tasmanian law and Commonwealth law. We're trying to bring the whole thing together. So hopefully we'll have that ready in the next couple of months.
Thank you, Archbishop. Bishop Tarabo, if I could turn to you. Your church serves the Lebanese community, is that correct?
Yes.
And where do your priests from overseas come from?
For the priest, first let me explain that the Maronite community, the large majority of the community coming from Lebanese ancestry. And but we have, especially recently, some families coming from Syria. They are Maronite, and other families from Egypt, where we have Maronite as well, but small communities. But the large majority of our priests, they are currently serving, coming from Lebanon. And at some stage, after I became a bishop, I worked to change that policy into looking into encouraging vocation from within the community here to continue the service of in the diocese.
And when you do have priests who were born overseas and ordained overseas and come to Australia, what programs do you have, or what assistance do you have for them in dealing with cultural issues in Australia?
Yeah. Firstly, unlike the situation in the other dioceses, the Maronite priests coming to serve in Australia, they are coming to serve in the same church and the same community. So, and then in the Maronite church, we don't have the diversity that other priests encounter in other parishes and other dioceses. So it's the same community. This is first. And secondly, we're very keen to make the induction of the new priest coming from overseas. I would say this is, it's not happening much. During my time, 3 years bishop, I have had 2 priests only coming, and both of them, they have served here before. So they are not completely new to the community here. However, we are very keen in the diocese to guide them and to make the induction with them into especially the integrity in ministry, which is first, it comes first, and also when it comes to the Australian way of life, regarding taxation, regarding other matters, way of living, banking, all that. So it is a whole induction. And we have to make the effort, which is we are doing with with my office. We are translating some of these documents into Arabic to make sure that from the beginning, the priest coming from overseas with little knowledge of English will be able to understand what we're talking about, especially when it comes to working with children.
Thank you. Now, are you aware of the evidence given by Dr. Robinson last week as to her screening of some of the seminarians for the Maronite church?
Yes, I am.
And are you aware that the effect of her evidence was that, and I quote, the Maronites are doing something right?
I thank her for that.
Now, are you aware of whether her screening related to married priests, celibate priests, or both?
Both. At the moment, we have 9. 2 of them are opting for celibate priesthood. They started their seminary in Wagga, and now we decided to have them nearby in Sydney. And I'm very grateful to Bishop Vincent Long that he accepted them into his seminary, in the Holy Spirit Seminary in Parramatta. And she assessed these 2 candidates. And both of them, they have finished university before I accepted them into the seminary. So they are very much ready for seminary, and they understand what's the requirement of priesthood. And the rest, 7 of them, they are married. So instead of having seminary life, we will have like regular meeting and seminars and in service with them to introduce them to mainly the liturgy and the service in the parishes in the diocese. So the assessment for the 9, and I believe she was very impressed with the married candidate for the priesthood in our eparchy.
Thank you. Now, Bishop Long, you made mention of your diocese response to child sexual abuse within the diocese, which is, I think, called Healing and Support. Is that correct?
That is one part of our response.
Yes. Would you be able to give the Commission a short outline of the response in Parramatta to victims and survivors of child sexual abuse?
I'd like to preface my response by saying that I came from Melbourne. I was an auxiliary bishop of Melbourne before moving to Parramatta as an ordinary, and I met with many victims who had gone through the Melbourne response and were profoundly dissatisfied with the way they had been treated. And I met many victims some in their homes, some in different places, and the encounters with those victims really moved me. I mean, there was an incident where a father and 2 adult sons recounted their experience, and watching these grown men weep and weep bitterly really had a strong impact on me. And I asked myself, how can I look at these victims in the eyes and say, I share your pain, I share your suffering, without doing anything in my power to bring about justice, dignity, and healing for them. I became very determined that this must be my priority, especially as an ordinary. in the diocese to ensure that victims receive justice, receive respect, receive dignity, receive all that is due to them. And so when I came to Parramatta, I wanted to implement that, and I can say with the degree of confidence that the victims who have had recourse to our system, to our Office of Safeguarding and Professional Standards, are treated with dignity, respect, and most of all, justice. The healing and support team is one way to ensure that the victims are properly assisted, accompanied, that there isn't a legal shield that prevents them from accessing justice and dignity. I must say that the victims who have gone through our system are by and large satisfied with the way we've treated them. I sat with 9 victims and listened to their stories, and all the 9 of them conveyed their appreciation and gratitude. That's not to say that there is that I can be complacent about it, but I just want to ensure that victims who come to our diocese, come to our system, do experience genuinely healing, justice and dignity.
Thank you. And do you take the view that your own personal experience, which we've heard about as a refugee transiting through a Malaysian refugee camp, has that informed in any way your response to the victims of child sexual abuse?
I think it does. I think we are all products of our life experiences, and being a refugee provides me with that particular vantage point through which I form relationships with people. I evaluate their individuality, their personal stories, their dignity. I was also a victim of sexual abuse by clergy when I first came to Australia, even though I was an adult. That had a powerful impact on me and how I want to, walk in the shoes of other victims and really endeavour to attain justice and dignity for them.
Thank you, Bishop Long. There's no further questions.
Nothing further, Your Honour.
May they all be excused?
Yes.
You are all excused, but before you go, can I thank each of you for joining with us today? Some of you have travelled a great distance. The work that we've done over now 4 years, of course, has concerned or is concerned with a great many institutions throughout Australia, not just the Catholic Church. I'm sure it's apparent to all of you and others that the numbers, if nothing else, tell us that there's a story that needed to be looked at with the church, with your church, in detail, and that not only is it necessary for us to understand, but it's more important perhaps that you understand what's been taking place and come with all of your colleagues to determine the way forward. But thank you again. You're excused, and we'll adjourn until...
Your Honour, perhaps just before we do that, if I could tender a bundle of documents which are the policies and procedures described in the statements tender bundle which I tendered this morning.
That'll be Exhibit 5011.
There's one exception to that, which is tab 539, which will be tendered today.
Very well.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Tomorrow morning at 10?
Yes, Your Honour.
And who do we have tomorrow morning?
We have the heads of the various religious institutes.
Institutes. Yes, very well. We'll adjourn until then.